Feliz Cinco de Mayo, familia. Today we celebrate culture, courage, and community, the kind that crosses borders and speaks from the soul. Yep, you got it right. This is the Black Gold Texas Tea Show, where we honor every voice, every flavor, every rhythm that makes life richer. I'm your host, Sweet Tea, and you know some call me Texas Tea. But listen, today I got a special treat for you because today we're tipping our hats and raising our glasses to the beauty of Mexican heritage and the history behind this powerful day. Now, don't get it twisted. I know we like to run out and get a good margarita and have a taco or a burrito, but listen, this isn't just about tacos and margaritas. Cinco de Mayo honors the Battle of Pueblo, where a small Mexican force defeated a much larger French army. And it's a reminder that underdogs can rise, that courage can win the day. So as I said, today, a very special day because we're not just going to talk about culture, celebration, and the power of standing your ground with pride, with color, and a song. Today, we got a special guest. My guy that's more than a friend. He's family to me. And you know those people when we want to call them family, these are those people that are rare people that God places in your life because they just get you with all your little idiosyncrasies or whatnot. The ones who laugh with you, walk with you, and show up like a little brother would. That's who I'm talking about. That's who's with me today. I'm so proud. He is of Mexican heritage, full of wisdom and stories, and brings a light that makes every room better. We're sitting down to talk about Cinco de Mayo, culture, celebration, and the deeper meaning behind the music and the memories. So help me in welcoming, with my own round of applause, my brother from another mother, Rick Rodriguez, right here on the Black Gold Texas Tea Show. Come on, Rick. You know, see, that's what I'm talking about. My brother. You better come on now.
Ay, muchísimas gracias, Teresa. Te quiero agradecer mucho por este apoyo que me has. No, I'm just teasing.
I was gonna say,
we'll speak English.
I was gonna try to throw in, what is it?
Translate.
Yeah, I was gonna try to join your conversation, but that's why I got in trouble trying to speak Spanish before, and I didn't know what I was supposed to do.
Well, as we know, we all got a little something in all of us. So.
You know it. That flavor is what makes it good, honey. That flavor is what makes it good. So listen, thank you so much for hanging out with me, brother.
Absolutely.
I've been looking forward to this whole thing since January. I know I called you back then and said, listen, I know it's coming. And you know, we've known each other for such a long time, Rick, you know, for more years than we even need a number at this point. But I do want you to know that I am so blessed to call you my friend and my brother.
Well, thank you. I mean, you've known me when I was 325. You've known me when I had black hair. You've known me when I didn't have a mustache and goatee. So, yeah, we go way, way, way back.
Way back.
And it's an honor. You know, a couple of years ago when we had this conversation about, you know, your wish list and talking about you wanting to do a podcast. And I jokingly said, well, just make it happen. And ta-da, here we are.
Yeah,
so
you have that. You have that way. Well, that's just one of them where you speak things into my existence. That's another reason I love being with you as my friend and brother.
But what I'm here to bear witness to is that, you know, you put that thought into action, and then God cleared everything else out of the way. That's what that was. And I am honored to be on your show with you, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm ready when you are.
Well, thank you, brother. Let's get into it, man. You know, a lot of people outside Mexico associate Cinco de Mayo with parties, like I was saying before. They want to have some margaritas and hang out. But does this day really mean? I'm saying, what does this day really mean to you and your family?
You know, growing up, I grew up in Texas. We're native Texans now. There is a border dispute going on now, but just for the record, I don't want anybody to come looking for me. And if you do, that's cool.
I know that's
if you do, that's cool. You know, my family's probably been here 6, 7 generations, and what I mean by that is in that time period, the border was moved on us. Texas was part of Mexico at one point.
Say
And just for a little bit of history, my grandparents met on the ranch of LBJ back when he was a kid in Fredericksburg, Texas. So, I'm quote from here, but the question was about Cinco de Mayo and what it meant. And I'll be honest, growing up, it didn't mean a whole lot. It was Cinco de Mayo. My buddies would talk about how they were going to go eat Mexican food, and I'm looking at them like, dude, literally everything I eat is Mexican. I am Mexican, right? So spaghetti is Mexican, right? We're a Mexican family. So that piece of it was kind of lost on me. But I do appreciate the fact that my mom would make maybe a special meal that day, or she would make sure that we understood history. And it wasn't history I was learning in school. She told me that the Battle of Puebla was a big deal, that the Battle of Puebla was about the French coming in to kind of take over, and they were on their way somewhere else to continue that fight. And if you think about it, now that I'm older, obviously I did more research, and if you think about it, the French army possibly, and I'm not a historian, all I'm saying is that the fact that a small group of Mexicans was able to kick some tail in a very small town against a really, really large trained army. I mean, they were part of Napoleon's army, and they were coming through, and they just assumed they were going to make it through, and they got their butt kicked. Depending on what you read, I mean, either the Mexican side lost 100 people and they lost 500 people, or the Mexican side lost 100 people and they lost 1,000 people. Doesn't really matter as much as it is a testament to the fact that if you stay ready, you don't got to get ready. As one of our colleagues used to tell us all the time, running, props to running. But more than that, it was about us fortifying, the Mexican folks fortifying an area and making it harder for them to push through. And then they flanked them, and they kind of defeated them that way. So there's a lot going on there, and that was May 5th, 1862. That was General Ignacio Zaragoza did all of that. But what's interesting to me is that even in Mexico today, it's not as big a celebration as you would have thought. Now in Puebla, in the actual town, it's a huge thing, right? Because they did that. Yeah. And so that is a huge thing. In Mexico, it's kind of like, Cinco de Mayo. It's not Mexican Independence Day, which is celebrated on September 16th.
Which a lot of people get mixed up. And I was people. So I was glad to learn more about it myself. Yeah.
Yeah. So September 16th is Mexican Independence Day. And think of it just like the United States Declaration, because it was a declaration of independence. They went on to fight for years after that. But that was September 16th. So Cinco de Mayo is a battle, much like somebody would talk about the Battle of Gettysburg or those kinds of things. So in this, look at the time frame, 1862, that was in that Civil War thing going on. And, as I'm doing some research to make sure I have my facts straight, Teresa, did you know that 3 years after this, so on September 5th, 1860, May 5th, 1868, did you know that Martha Jones became the first Black woman to receive a U.S. patent?
No, I didn't.
So maybe that's a whole other conversation. But what I'm saying is, as you go down these rabbit holes to try and learn more about culture and things like that, I am of Mexican descent. Right. They sell T-shirts that say American born with Texas roots. You know what? We're all American. We all got here. Very few of us are native. You've seen my grandma's picture, so you know that she was native, things like that. But Cinco de Mayo for me growing up was different. It was a different day. It was celebrated because of the schools that I went to. They were all integrated schools, and they asked us to quote, dress Mexican on that day. And so I jokingly put on this guayabera. I actually like guayaberas, don't get me wrong,
Oh, I do
uh,
too.
but depending on who you talk to, guayabera is either Mexican or it's Cuban
Cuban.
or it's
Mhm.
Filipino, or bottom line is the style of dress is the style of dress, and it's prevalent through a lot of different cultures.
And that's what I was gonna
So
say. There's
yeah,
probably this running thread that,
mhm,
one of the things that I always say, Rick, is we're more alike than we are different.
absolutely,
There's this
absolutely.
thread that runs through all of us that holds us all the same. And I know that you have a richness in your pride regarding your culture, and
Yeah,
that's another reason I wanted to talk to you about it. And listen, real talk. I didn't hear
sure.
about Juneteenth till I was grown, and they started to commercialize it. So I
Hey,
get as a kid that for whatever reason, it wasn't as big a deal to us as it might have been to some. Would you agree with that?
well, absolutely. I can remember like it was yesterday being in at IBM, and we were talking about Juneteenth, and my buddy Andre was like, "What are you talking about?" I see. I didn't put two and two together that it was a Texas thing.
People
I
in
thought
Texas didn't
Juneteenth.
put it together. So,
Andre was from Chicago,
oh well,
and
no.
and Andre was mad because we had, and I wish I was making this up, but we did, but it happened. They had fried chicken, they had
And
sliced
soda
watermelon,
water, watermelon.
sliced watermelon, and
Mhm.
and Big Red, and I'm
Yeah,
going
that's it.
and great, and I'm like what, and so he clued me in onto what that felt like,
Yeah.
and it was interesting because I clued him in onto what Cinco de Mayo felt like because we had an affinity group, and when we did Cinco de Mayo, everybody did mock margaritas, and they did piñatas, and they did the colorful, calaveras, the skulls and stuff. And I'm thinking, yeah, that didn't happen at my house. And so when you asked me about this topic and I jumped on it, I'm like, you know what? I can remember those times. I can remember the special meals. But now when later on, after my father had passed and my mom had to raise three of us on her own, and I come home and the lights are turned off and we're having a romantic dinner by candlelight, and I'm smart enough to know that that's not what's going on. The
Yeah.
lights had got turned off.
Yeah.
And so my dad died when I was 12. And at 13, I decided I was going to work. I haven't stopped yet. But what that did is that forced me into trying to figure out what a 13-year-old could do to make some money. And frankly, I lied about how old I was. I worked at a printing company at night. But my dad had bought me this trumpet, and I started to play it more. And what that turned into is I became part of a mariachi, and so in the mariachi sense, Cinco de Mayo is a big deal because there's a lot of affinity groups, there's a lot of cultural awareness going on. Even back then, they would have us come to like the library and play a few songs, or they'd have us go to an outdoor event and play a few songs. And what I realized is that I was famous. At least for those three songs, I was famous, and I liked that. And and it wasn't until later that I started to appreciate the fact that it wasn't about playing music. It was about playing cultural music. It was about the history involved in that type of music. And it was about honoring my culture. And, I jokingly, put this sombrero that's behind me. I had that on at the beginning of our segment. And frankly, I never, I wore a hat like this because it was cheap, not because it was part of the outfit.
Oh,
A,
wow.
a, tr- a true charro outfit doesn't have all this embellishment on it. It's more, they're really expensive because they're all handmade. They're
Mm.
palm leaf hats. For the most part, some of them are velvet, if you will, and they're really ornate around the corners. But this
Okay.
is what they give to tourists, right?
And I said,
So little different. And by the way, it's made in China. So go figure. But what I'm saying is that for me later, once I was 12 and older, it became a very big cultural thing for me because what that led to was me having the ability to do Cinco de Mayo with my group. I played probably 17-ish years with the same folks, and we had our own group, and we would tour, and Cinco de Mayo was a big day for us. If we were working, we'd take off because we could make more money. we could make more money playing at these different gigs all day long. And then we'd wind up at some bar, and the bar was running a promo, and we'd get to eat for free, and we'd go in and play some songs, and everybody that's not Hispanic that was celebrating Cinco de Mayo was having a good time, and they'd usually tip us really well. So it's interesting, right? That in Mexico proper, Cinco de Mayo is not a really big deal unless you're in Puebla.
Okay.
It's interesting to me that it's a bigger deal, in my opinion, here in the States than it is over there. And we'll get there.
Yeah, we commercialize everything though.
Right.
That
Oh
if
yeah.
we're gonna make some money, they're gonna find a way. We're gonna find
Right.
a way. A way will be made that it's going to be a big deal. Was there, I talked about, what we call Mexican food, and I know that it's way
Right.
deeper than that. And I
Sure.
almost asked, was it something that was celebrated across the Latin community? And then I thought about, I was like, duh, it's about a Mexican battle, so probably not. But the other
Right.
thing is, were there, like you said, your mom made a special meal. What would she do that was special that made that feel just a little different than any other day?
Fajitas are like the cheapest piece of meat that you can get because it's a skirt
I'd
steak,
say,
if you will. And now it's more expensive because it's more popular. But back then, I didn't care that it was a cheap piece of meat. I just knew that my mom prepared it in such a way that it tasted really good. And so we didn't have that kind of money to have, quote, steak all the time. So it was a nice change of pace for us. It was also, I can appreciate it more now. I didn't really kind of get it back then. To every stereotype, there's some truth. And, the stereotype about how many Mexicans can you fit in a car? And, they're big families. And if you think about it, there's a lot of truth to that. In that example, I grew up in this house. Across the street was my aunt and her 7 kids. And 2 doors down from that was my other aunt, who only had 4 kids. And then come back this way, one of those 4 kids that grew up brought his family. So that block, everybody on that block had permission to whoop me, right? But on stuff like Cinco de Mayo, Diez y Seis, Mother's Day, things like that, we all got together at somebody's house, and we just kind of got together. And I guess the reason I gravitated towards music was my what I call my Tio Chuy, my Uncle Jesse, or his name was Jesus. But my Uncle Jesse would pull out a guitar and he'd start playing, and my aunts would start singing, and my dad would sing. Now my dad was pretty much tone deaf, but he had written down all the songs, before Google. He would like listen to them and write the words down. And so they all kind of sang together as a group. And that's probably the best memory I ever had of my family. And that was all around, now I know the word, it was all around our culture, which is familia, which is family based. And any excuse to get together, right? So, like I said, birthdays, Mother's Day, Cinco de Mayo, Diez y Seis, didn't matter. We weren't necessarily saying, hey, happy Cinco de Mayo. We weren't doing that, but we were celebrating each other. And we were getting together and we were having a really, really good time together. And that's probably the biggest piece of my culture, in that every color under the rainbow, and I mean that literally, was at my family's house. Because if you dated one of us, my aunts in particular, y'all could have broke up, but my aunt would invite you back anyway. like my cousin Johnny and his new girlfriend was there with his ex-girlfriend and her boyfriend. I mean, it was the weirdest thing ever. But that's how my family was.
I feel that sense of inclusivity is what I see happening, because I mean, tell you, like even me hanging out with you, I experienced that. I can't remember. I don't know if it was for your 50th birthday or what.
Right.
When your sisters and your mom showed No, Brenda's sisters.
Right.
Her mom showed up.
Right.
And I became a sister just like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate about the Mexican culture. And actually, I can say the Latin culture from there. The whole mindset of family is huge.
And I'm going to go down a rabbit hole for a second. If you think about it, in the slave trade days,
Mhm.
when they were bringing enslaved people, they had to come via ocean.
Mhm.
And so there were some of the enslaved folks that jumped ship and
Mhm.
they wound up in places like Cuba, and
Mhm.
they wound up in places like Puerto Rico.
That's
They
right.
wound up in places like Veracruz, Mexico.
Mhm.
And if you do a little history there, Veracruz is a fishing town.
Okay.
But people there look like you and me.
Mhm.
Why? Because we were forced into mixing with the natives that were there, who were also treated badly. Let's just call
Mhm.
it what it was.
Mhm.
And we didn't let that stop us. We turned that into familia.
Mhm.
So not not all Hispanics are created the same,
No, not
right?
all people are created the same,
Right,
though.
right, and you're right. Not all people, but I think the inclusivity comes from the fact that we literally look like every culture in God's
Listen, I
rainbow.
would argue that point with you, except that I shout
Mhm,
out to my girl Gladys Wilson in Tampa, because
mhm,
when I started, I worked at MCI for a long time before I met you, and
mhm.
she and I worked together. And when I met her, all I heard was this accent, and
Right,
all the people that I ever met that were Puerto Rican looked like you or
yeah,
lighter, right?
right,
So she looked like me. And
right,
so I looked at her and I said, "Oh, you have the most beautiful accent." I was like, "What island are you from?" Because, with all the intelligence that I have, what island are you from? And she said, "Island, the island of Puerto Rico, maybe." And she said, just what you explained. She said that, we're crazier than most. So that just means that they pushed us off the ship. They couldn't take us any further because we were raising so much hell. They pushed us off before they got there, and we made our way to Puerto Rico. That's why we are Puerto Rican. And she said it in just, and kind of with a laugh, tongue in cheek kind of thing. But it says again, if the truth is told and when it is told,
right.
we are all connected in some kind of capacity. And you've listened as I'm listening to you and I'm going through my mind of the things that I wanted to ask you about. I thank you that you walked right down that street with all of the things that I wanted to know. But I do want you to express this, because I know you. I know the resilience that's in your family, and I know the respect that's in your family, and I know the resistance that's in your family, and I know what you've been through. But I
Right.
want you to help me and anyone who's seeing this particular show. Tell us, how can we all respectfully join in a celebration of the Mexican culture as it stands with all the marketing that's going on?
Sure.
What can we do respectfully to honor the Battle at Pueblo?
I think for a lot of people, it's an excuse to act a little silly.
Yeah.
It's a costume party, if you will. It's wearing the hats. It's drinking the margaritas and all that. And from this one Hispanic representation guy right here, I'm telling you, it's not a big deal. And that's cool. I mean, heck, for a large part of my life, every March 17th, I was Irish. I
That's,
get it.
yeah, yeah.
I get it. Um, and I think just like anybody would want, it's just a respect thing. It's in our political environment today, I think it's starting to turn into the way it was a really long time ago, and not in a good way.
Not in a
As
good
far as people, having prejudices that they don't even hide anymore. They just kind of say them. And that part is scarier to me than whether or not you respect Cinco de Mayo.
way. Mhm.
Um, uh, but you know me well enough that I'm also the guy that says, okay, cool. You don't want, quote, you don't want me here, but yet you're celebrating Cinco de Mayo. I got an issue with that too.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it's really more about uh, the respect.
Mhm.
And I think it's a two-way street. I think that when we celebrate, which next month we're going to celebrate Juneteenth, I think that we need to acknowledge our past sins. That wasn't a good thing. I mean, what it celebrated was Emancipation Proclamation 2 years after the fact, mind you, in Texas. And the fact that I know that and I'm Hispanic, I think that shows that I've got a little bit of respect for the culture. You know, I grew up with a mom that told me about the Battle of Puebla. I grew up with a mom that used to laugh because I remember this redneck guy in this big old truck, and we knew he was like not a nice guy. And on the back of his truck, it said the Yellow Rose of Texas. And my mom would die laughing. And so finally I was like, Mom, that guy scares me, you know? And she starts to tell me about the Yellow Rose of Texas and how she was an African American woman.
My brother, go on and teach.
She's an African American woman that helped other enslaved people get out. And she was tied into the Underground Railroad, and she did it. And I'm sitting there going, what? I said, because, you know, hey, I was a decent student and nobody told me that story.
Let's talk about that stuff.
But I believe my mom, because my mom.
Because why would you not?
Right, you know, because if I didn't, there's a chancla involved, but that's a whole other stuff. That's a whole other topic. But what I'm saying, I guess, it's just a respect thing. Why wouldn't we want to learn about each other's cultures? And frankly, the people making the most noise about get out, their folks ain't from here.
But I think therein lies a huge challenge and opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And right. I don't know if you've been paying attention to the BlackGold-TexasTee show, but that is what the black gold in the name of my show stands for. You know, initially as an African American, the black gold is the richness of my own heritage. But with the diversity of friends that I have, and I've always appreciated, I thought it would be an amazing opportunity to share and teach and learn of the richness of all cultures, because I truly believe that we are more alike than we are different. And when we have the audacity to have these conversations of learning and of understanding and discovery, then we will start to operate more in alignment towards all of our successes. You know what I'm saying? Because I think as long as we draw lines and put up these walls, then we're still going to be boxed off and no one can grow beyond that. I want to take us further than that.
Yeah, and it's sad, right? You know, it's sad that the divisiveness is starting to make a comeback. Mm-hmm. I was at in February. I was at work, and we had a Black History Month talk, and it was just come and go kind of thing. But one of the guys that was speaking, he looks at me and I wasn't sure where he was going with it at first, but he said, I just recently went to Mexico. So in my head, I go, okay, great. So I'm like I'm like the only Mexican here. So where's he going with this? Right. And what it turned into was he talked about going to the ruins and going to, you know, to see the idols, the heads that were in Mexico. And he was talking about how you know, the features and how they looked very Indian or native. Mm-hmm. And then another one looked kind of like he might have been mixed with Spanish. And then he goes, and then I saw one with a broad nose, mm-hmm. and it looked like my uncle. Mm-hmm. And I started laughing, and everybody was like, uh-oh, because they weren't sure how to take that. I knew where he was going. Right. I knew where he was going with that, right? Because, you know, if you do some history and you look into it, you know, that North America and South America used to be connected. Yes. And so people used to walk back and forth, and you know, my 23andMe, I hope my subscription still works because they went out of business, but whatever. It says that I have some African, DNA and stuff like that. So the truth is truth. Mm-hmm. And where I'm going with that is, in that talk, a lot of people didn't realize that that's like a real thing. Like these things have been there for hundreds of years. Mm-hmm. And yet what they're showing is that none of this is new. Right. Integration is not new. Mm-hmm. The hair like wool is not new. The fact that certain cultures portray him as long-haired, auburn-haired, doesn't keep from this book that I read from time to time, not as much as I should, but talks about hair like wool. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, you know what? Again, we're more alike than we are different.
That's it.
And St. Patrick's Day is a Catholic holiday
Yeah.
celebrating,
Mhm.
Saint Patrick.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of Protestants that celebrate it.
Sure.
Why? Because it's an excuse to party, and I get it, but it's also an excuse to eat corned beef hash. It's also an excuse to, experience cabbage in a different way. The cultural pieces of it, the food, for me, Mexican is not necessarily what we get in Texas, because what we get in Texas is
Yes, it
Tex-Mex.
is
It's
Tex-Mex.
not the same.
That's right.
And so even my Mexican meal is really a Tex-Mex meal, not a Mexican
Okay.
meal.
Okay.
And so those are the things, those cultural nuances, if you will, are the things that make us unique. But if you really start pulling back the layers, not that unique. African Americans in this country and Mexicans in this country were normally kind of lower rung, if you will, because they were held down.
Correct.
And we had to make the most with less. And so for example, in a Mexican family, we don't waste anything. You give us a pig, we're going to boil the head, we're going to do barbacoa from the cheeks, we're going to cook ham hocks, we're going to do all that. We're going to take the feet and we're going to pickle the feet and we're going to eat the feet, and we're going to take the tripe and we're going to make menudo. And wait a minute, but you're Black or
Right.
African American
Totally.
and you do the same
Same thing.
thing?
Same thing.
You mean
And might
you
call
call
it
them,
something different, but it's the
yeah, you might call it
same
chitterlings,
thing.
or you might call it pig ears or whatever. But it's the same thing. And I think if we're honest with each other, I think what we find out is that we are a culture of survivors. They thought they had us, so to speak, and we survived anyway. We survived with less, and we made those dollars stretch more because we didn't have a choice. The innovation piece of it. I jokingly said, "Did you know?" It's a true story, by the way. Did you know that the first Black woman got a patent 3 years after this date, Cinco de Mayo? And what she did was she improved upon a corn husk machine. Okay. So my thought is, and I don't know, and I didn't read the whole story, but my thought is that, okay, her family was working crops just
You
like
already
Mexican
know.
migrant
That's
families
right.
work
Yep.
crops.
Yep.
And she thought there's a better way to do that.
That's right.
And she came up with an idea. And oh, by the way, she got a patent. And so generational wealth and generational innovation doesn't come in a vacuum. It happens out of necessity. And what happens is, for all of us, whether you're Hispanic or, yeah, I don't know what the moniker is this week, African American, Black, they call us Mexicans, they call us wetbacks, they call us a lot of things.
Right.
I even had a conversation one time where this guy was arguing with me about what part of Mexico was Puerto Rico from. And when I started to have the argument, I thought, wait a minute, why am I even bothering? He literally thinks Puerto Rico's part of Mexico.
Yeah.
So anything I tell him, he's not going to believe anyway. So move on. It took me a long time to get there, where I'm at an age now where I'd rather be happy than right. And so there's a lot of that going on. But for me, the resilience part, that was a long way to get back to resilience. But the resilience part for me came from watching my mom, bury the love of her life, and respecting us kids enough to have never, till the day she died, never brought another man around us, period. She never remarried. In our culture, it's big on family. So when my grandfather died, my mother left our home, took my younger siblings, and moved in with my grandmother to make sure she was okay. And she had 9 brothers and sisters, but she was the widow. So therefore, she didn't have the responsibility of a husband. So she was the one expected to go take care of them. And it sounds like I'm a little resentful, but you know what? It made me who I am. So I can't be too mad. I can't be too mad.
No.
But the caveat that I'll give you is, what that meant was, 15-year-old me lived by myself.
Mm.
My mother lived over there.
Mm.
15-year-old me was working nights, getting off at 6 in the morning, sometimes showering, sometimes not, to make it to band practice. And 15 and 16-year-old me was playing gigs to make extra money, to keep the lights on. And when you said resilience, I went, whoa, because
That is.
I I just did the next right thing. The next right thing for
Mhm.
us was
Mhm.
help the family. And when you asked the questions in the pre-work about resilience, you took me down a path I wasn't ready to go down because I hadn't been down it in a while. But I'm grateful,
Yeah, and I
because
think that's the end. That's the part of it that I want us to drive towards, Rick.
yeah.
Because honestly, in the amount of time that you and I have known each other, there are
Mhm.
so many things that our lives, so many different ways that our lives parallel. You know,
Oh, absolutely.
my mom, your mom, and what I like,
Yeah.
what, and I don't know about you, but it sounds like we've done some of the same things. Like when
Mhm.
we're going through it, it was what it was. But and I guess we can say this in honor of Mother's Day too, as we're approaching that. But I've thought about things like I wish my mom had shared with me differently. I wish she had done this. I wish she had done that. But I had to come to a place of understanding.
Right.
Neither of us have any idea what led our mothers to being who they were at
Right.
that point in their lives. And no
Absolutely.
doubt they did the very best they could with what they had to work with. And that resilience stands strong in the African American community as it stands strong in the Mexican American community. I would stand flat footed and say that anywhere. And as we get ready to wrap up, the thing that I want you to know is the time that I've known you has made me have joy. And we've been through a whole lot of different things. We've been through employment and unemployment and re-employment to where we employed other people and found ways to giving joy to other people through our gifts from God. But I say all of that to say, Rick, I hope you hear me when I tell you that I can't wrap this show up unless I tell you how grateful I am to you as my brother and my friend. I want to tell you that this is a heartfelt thank you to you as an amazing person. I appreciate that you pulled me into your family to celebrate some of the culture. The quinceañera for my baby girl was beautiful, to be with all of your friends after in part of your recovery years ago. And I will say this real quickly because shout out to Larry, our boy Larry, because this was hilarious to me. I think I told you. But when I got there, I was the chocolate in the white milk for a moment.
Right.
Even though it was Mexican milk, it might, I don't know, okay, it might have been a Texas
Vanilla.
kid. Anyway, anyway, when I walked up, it was like the men all paused because everybody stopped. Like, and Larry said, "You want a Rick's friends?" I said, "Yes, I am, and I guess you are as well." He was like, "Yeah, we are. You are right." And it's like when he said that, that was my pass.
Yeah.
Everybody gravitated toward me, whatever. Man, it's just the thing
Well,
that I found in being in your presence and hanging around you, that you have
well,
always shown me respect. You have always shown me love. You've always shared your wisdom. You've always shown support for whatever it was I was working with. And Rick, my dear friend and brother, you have always kept me grounded. And I want you to know that I see you and I
well,
appreciate you more than I can put into words.
thank you. Well, for those that are going to make the time to watch this, I want to say this out loud. The gifts we're given can only manifest when we give them away.
That's right.
We can't. We didn't pay for them,
That's right.
and the only way we get to keep stuff is if we give it away. In my case, it might be my sobriety, or it might be the fact that I literally died, and I woke up 6 days later and you're there in my hospital room, and it freaked me out. As was Tanya, as was Lamont. Uh, but but I mean, those are things that not even all my family did, and it's not a knock on my quote blood family.
No, not at all.
But I think the ties that bind us are the familia of choice.
That's
And
right.
I think the ties that bind us in particular is that we understand that we didn't get here by ourselves. I
That's
think I think I think the difference between a Negro spiritual and a Mexican corrido is null and void. I think they're the same thing. I think they all tell stories of our ancestors and they get passed down. And when you celebrate Cinco de Mayo and you hear that mariachi trumpet play, you hear that violin, you hear that soulful voice, you hear that pain, that cry in the voice, then I want you to go listen to a Negro spiritual, whatever it is. And I want you to listen to that that emphatic cry in the voice, that storytelling. It's the same because it's the same pain that got them there.
it's the spirit
And
and the soul. Yeah,
and and regardless of their circumstance and their situation, God had them no matter what.
that's right.
And that's what I've come to believe. And regardless of the political climate, now, but I am going to go there just a little bit, is for me, a foreigner residing, I'm going to read this, a foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt. And there's many more. I mean, that's happens to be Leviticus 19:33 through 34, but there's many more scriptural passages that talk about how whether you were enslaved and brought here against your will or you got here trying to seek a better life, whether you like it or not, it's part of the American fabric. Yes, we're talking about Cinco de Mayo, but I'm here to tell you that in my soul, I feel like Cinco de Mayo, 16 de septiembre, whether or not you believe the Emancipation Proclamation happened, or whether you believe it happened 2 years later in Juneteenth, I think that all those things are part of the fabric that gets woven together. That is
Absolutely.
America. It's
Absolutely.
not, it's not, they're not in silos. It's not, this isn't isolation. This is all of that stuff works together. People that had an O at the end of their name that came from Italy got that knocked off, and people act like, well, I'm not one of them. No, that's not true. You do your history. We
Well,
all
and
came
think
from
of the
somewhere.
absolutely, and think of the beauty of that patchworked mosaic quilt of American history if we would only open up and knit ourselves together instead of finding frayed edges here or yonder and deciding that we're going to tear each other apart. So let me just say this. We got to go because, you and me can get together. We can go for a long time. So just know
Two.
this is not
Hey,
the last one. There will
in
be
the comments,
more.
if you want another,
Absolutely,
want another round,
absolutely,
we'll do it.
absolutely. We'd love to have that. But I don't want to leave before you tell about one of your other gifts, so that they know how to reach to you regarding your being a fabulous DJ, expounding on that love for music. Tell us about it, Rick.
Well, it's funny because when I stopped playing, because Brenda, my wife, basically didn't like me practicing at 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't know what that was about, having a young family, kids, and all that.
Trying to play a
Uh,
trumpet.
right. Being out there, having people say how good I was and my ego getting like this. I had to replace it with something. So at a time it might have been alcohol, but then I got better, and then it became music, and we chose to have Catholic education for our kids. So I started DJing, and I've been doing it ever since. My children are grown now, thankfully, and they're well-centered folks,
They
and
are.
so I still do that. It's something that I love to do. I'm not the DJ that, hey, this is Rick. I don't interrupt music. I think my strong suits are I can read a crowd.
Yeah.
I think my other strong suits are that you tell me what you want, and like I've done Indian from India type weddings. When Bollywood was real big, years ago, I did a whole set list of that, and I mixed it live, and if I see folks that look like your side of the family, and I'm at a gig, and let's say it's a quinceañera, there's not a whole lot of songs out there that tell them that I'm cool.
Yeah.
with a culture.
Right.
I can play a Michael Jackson or I can play an Aretha Franklin, but you don't know if I'm cool or not till I play Lenny Williams.
What?
That because that's when people go, because if you know, you know, right? And
That's right.
so,
That's right. And I know you're
so,
gonna throw some Frankie Beverly and Mays in there
oh, yeah,
somewhere.
right? Original Parliament,
There you go. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
and so that's, I think that's part of our blessing. I think, I give you a hard time because you look like some of my cousins, right? And I
And
give
you
you a
look
hard,
like some of mine. I don't.
and I give you a hard time because when you bought that style wig back in the day. Sorry, guys, it's an inside joke. But let's just say that people have asked, where did you buy it?
Oh my.
For the record, because I have verified it's real. I'm just saying. But again, we're more similar than different.
More like that we are different. And listen, I'm gonna have to shut you down because they're gonna put us off YouTube and everywhere else. But listen, what I do want to make a promise is we will come back together again. I'm so
Absolutely. I had fun, and
too. I'm
and
so glad you're here. And
to
listen,
to you, God, and your audience, I just want to say this, Teresa, I love you. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And I'm proud of you. Big time.
thank you very much, Rick. I'm proud of you too. And listen, May is my birthday month, and I'm just teasing it every show that I have in the month of May because I don't know what all I'm going to do because we know that birthdays aren't just about cakes and candles. It's also about reflection and celebration, and maybe a few surprises are here or there. So who's to say that you won't be around the corner hanging out with me again? But trust me, we're going to make sure we have some fun.
And in your case, a really nice pair of shoes.
What you
Just
say?
saying.
What you
I'm just
say?
saying.
We're gonna have to talk some more after this. Listen,
Because the Larry story, the part you
yes,
didn't tell everybody that I'm going to tell, is the first thing Larry did was look at your feet and go, damn. Because of the shoes, you remember?
see, y'all, this is why we have to get this guy in here with me. We're gonna have some more fun conversations, I'm so sure. But for right now, I hope that you have enjoyed hanging out with me and my brother Rick. He always
Absolutely.
brings great wisdom, great insight, and great laughter and joy. And so, what I want you to do is remember that we want you to always be aware of who you are. I tell you all the time, you're a child of the Most High God. And so keep shining, keep rising, keep living your best life. Let today start the rest of your life and make the rest of your life the best of your life. Listen, we're more alike than we are different. Be all
Absolutely.
that you can be. Until next time, God bless.